So this is going to be sampling day number 2. Looks to me like this is recording, this is recording, that's recording. We got everything going here. Any questions, comments?
Not today.
All right.
And these beeps are from yesterday?
Yes, yep. Mhm.
Then I think I'm ready if everybody's ready.
Let's go for it.
What's in your experience of beat number 1?
Beep number 1. So I got down to the second, just before the beep,
Okay.
and I was in the middle of a sentence, and where the second before the beep beeped, I said the word march.
And what was the whole sentence? Well, I guess let's hear what the whole sentence is first.
So the sentence is, okay, March 10th works.
And are you saying this out loud or in your head or?
Out loud.
Okay.
Mhm.
And is it your experience that you're saying the whole sentence, okay, March 10th works? Or are you saying the word March? Question is, what's in your experience about this?
So, if I understand your question, I was saying the whole sentence out loud to another individual as I was scheduling something, and the beep went off just seconds before, or just seconds after I said the word March.
Okay.
So I
Mhm.
recorded that seconds before I was right on the word March.
Okay.
Okay.
And in your experience
Mhm.
is what? So I understand that the external world, including you, is saying, okay, on March 10th works, and
Mhm.
the beep comes at March. And is anything in your experience at that time, and if so, what?
The experience was I was speaking to a woman trying to schedule an appointment, and maybe on top of that, I was feeling maybe just a little bit overwhelmed, maybe annoyed a little, just because it was hard to find a day. It was hard to figure out what worked, so
Okay.
if that adds to it.
Well, so our object is to figure out or to try to discover what's in your direct experience. And so I'm understanding that the situation was annoying or overwhelming or something like that.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that it's in your experience. I can be annoyed and overwhelmed as a sort of an ongoing thing, but at this
Yeah.
particular moment, I don't experience it. Or I could be annoyed and overwhelmed and experiencing it at this time.
In that moment of the beep, when I said the word March, I was not annoyed. I believe I was more relieved in that moment of March happened, because we found the day.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is the feeling of being relieved present to you at the moment of the beep, or is that
It was
it's
present.
a fact of the universe that I found it,
Mhm.
but I could also be feeling relief?
It was present to me when the beep went off, and I realized that right seconds before the beep, I was on the word March, and in thinking about my experience in that precise moment, there was a sense of relief of finding the day that we wanted to schedule, but the general experience was, which is much more time outside of the beep, was annoyance.
Mhm.
That.
So let me see whether I've got this. So using our timeline here, we're looking for a day, can't find it, and I'm getting more and more annoyed and overwhelmed or whatever.
Mhm.
And finally, somewhere right before the beep, I begin to say, okay, March 10th works.
Mhm.
And as I'm saying that, I start to feel relief
Mhm.
and say the sentence out loud.
Yes.
And the beep catches me on the word March of that sentence, but I
Mhm.
don't experience myself as just saying the word March. I
Mhm.
experience myself as saying, okay, March 10th works, and the
Yes.
beep happens at March.
Yes.
Okay?
Mhm.
So it's possible to say a sentence like, okay, works, March 10th works, and feel like I'm the driver of that sentence, that I'm involved in saying it, or it could be that the words are just coming out and I'm not even paying attention to those at all. I'm really into the relief, for example.
Mm.
So my question is, are you experiencing the saying of this sentence in some way?
Not directly. not experiencing it directly. I think directly what I'm experiencing is the feelings, and then I'm making some sort of response to those feelings, but in a socially acceptable way. Like, I wouldn't ever show my annoyance to somebody who's just trying to help figure it out with me, you know? So I guess if that answers your question.
So we're not saying, man, I've really been annoyed here, but now I'm feeling a little bit of relief. We're not
Yeah.
saying that out loud.
No,
What we're saying out loud is,
Okay,
okay,
March 10th works. Yeah,
March 10th
being
works.
positive and, you
But
know,
my experience
yeah.
is mostly of relief, is that right?
Relief in that moment, yeah, in that beep.
So the and the moment of the beep we're looking for is like this right 1
Yeah.
millisecond just before the beep occurs.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like the primary piece of my experience, the primary thing before the footlights of my consciousness is something like relief. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
And the words are happening,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm not even paying attention to that. Is that correct? I'm
Yeah.
creating them, obviously. Nobody else is saying this. I'm saying it, but I'm not even really experiencing myself as saying that. Is that right?
For that particular beep, for that
Which is-
particular moment.
It's the only one we're
that-
talking about.
Right, that was the case, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that the words came out as something like a template that's inside of me that you kind of naturally go to when you're doing those types of things with other people. I wasn't conscious of exactly what I was saying.
Mhm.
It was just kind of a,
Yeah.
what you say in that moment when you're trying to figure out that kind of task.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so is it fair to say then that at the moment of this beep, I'm feeling relief? And everything else is sort of context or things that are going on in the universe, including inside me. The words are in my mouth, these words are coming out, but my experiences that is caught in the before the footlights of consciousness experience that's caught in flight by the beep is relief, is that right? And how does relief present itself to you? What does relief feel like in this particular moment? And I don't really care about relief in general. I mean,
Just
this
the-
particular relief that is the result of all of these things that have been going on. What?
For that specific moment, it was a relief of that I felt that I now had a solid day to go to the doctor,
Okay.
to do my annual thing, my annual visit.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so is the doctor annual visit present to you at this particular moment?
Yeah.
In what way?
Because I take my personal health very seriously, and I always like to keep up with my self in that way. So in the time that I felt relief in making that appointment, there was relief in knowing that I'm doing my health full duty to staying on top of my health.
So I'm understanding about health and it's a good
Yeah.
idea and all that stuff. I'm
Yeah.
agreeing with that. And the question is,
Mhm.
in what way, if at all, is that present to you at this
At that moment.
particular moment? So it could be,
Mhm.
for example, that out here somewhere I feel relief and I realize that I can make the doctor's appointment that I need to make, and then relief comes, but I've forgotten the relief, and the relief is still there right here.
Yeah.
But I'm no longer thinking about the doctor's office. Or maybe I'm thinking about the doctor's office primarily, that's what relief is. Now I can
Right.
imagine myself going to the doctor's office or whatever. I don't have a favorite experience here. The object is to figure out what is happening right then at that
Right.
moment.
Well, in the moment of deciding on the day and on that moment of relief, in that relief is the feeling of, okay, I've got it covered now. I'm taking care of my health.
So that's part of the relief.
That's part of the relief, yeah.
Is that just like a synonym for relief? Like it's
I guess
relief
for that
because I'm taking
context,
care of.
Yeah. For that particular beep, I would say yes. The relief is equal to the knowing that I'm doing something good for my health, like keeping up on my health.
And I guess the difference I'm getting at is relief sounds sort of like a feeling, like an emotional thing, or like. And I don't want to assume that it is, because I think people could say I'm feeling relieved and really they mean I'm saying to myself, oh, what a relief. and I would say that's a different thing than a feeling.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess I hear you saying it's because I made this annual appointment, it's for my health, all that. And I'm still trying to understand if that piece of it is present to you, like you somehow are aware of how all of this means I've made my annual appointment and I'm taking care of my health, or I just feel relief. And now when you guys are asking me about it, I can tell you, like, well, it's because I value my health and I made this annual appointment and it was hard to make. And does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. I would say that as far as I can take it, in that particular moment with the beep, and I made sure to circle the March part to know that that was the beep.
Mm-hmm.
And in confirming March 10th, when I said March, I knew that I felt relief. And the relief was, yes, a feeling of, just a feeling of, maybe a sensation, more of a bit subtle, not like some physical thing that overtakes me, like maybe more of an emotional relief. I wouldn't say physical. I would say it was an emotional relief that I made the decision and got the appointment.
So I don't feel this in my body, for example. My shoulders don't relax, or I take a deep breath or something like that. My shoulders may be relaxing and my breath may be deepening or whatever, but that's not what I feel. Is that?
I mean, maybe to some extent there is a physical release in the relief because my emotions and my physical body are united in some way. So in feeling the emotional relief, I, in some way, probably, yes, did respond physically, but that I noticed, no, because directly after the phone call and after I wrote this, I went right into something else.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't really take the time to analyze how deep the relief felt, how deep the relief went for me.
So we have no doubt that relief has some physical commitments that has to do with heart rate and blood pressure and all that stuff. But that does not mean that any of that stuff or all of that stuff is present in experience at the moment of the beat. The body is doing lots of stuff in parallel with lots of other stuff, and we're typically only paying attention to some small piece of it.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was asking about heart rate or shoulders or breathing or whatever I was asking about, I didn't mean to say, well, we should go and consult that and see whether we can measure that stuff. What I wanted to know was whether in your direct experience you felt your shoulders dropping or your breath deepening or.
So specifically, if I can take my mind back to the beat, you're asking that question, if I could take myself there and recall that?
All of these interviews, particularly the first several days interviews, are training in what is experience and what is not experience. And so the kinds of questions, most of the questions that I've been asking, I would say, are more about how do we go about trying to figure out what's in Lena's experience. They sound like I'm asking about what your experience was at the moment of this particular beat, which I am indeed interested in and asking about it. But mostly, I would say, I'm using this as the opportunity to choreograph or figure out how we can get better at it so that the next time we're actually better at it. So we have made we're still in the process of refining the moment of the beep. So we started out by talking about how I was overwhelmed and annoyed and whatever, but it turns out that was actually before the beep, and what was at the beep was relief. And so we're focusing the microscope in on the moment, and that takes practice, and and so what we're doing that. So I don't want to sound critical in the slightest here. This is what we have to do. If you're going to get good at a skill, we have to swing and miss sometimes and swing and hit sometimes and know the difference. That's what we're doing here. So we're narrowing in on what the moment of the beep is, and we're also narrowing in on what is experience. And so we're deciding here, well, there's some things that are directly before the footlights of my consciousness, and there's other stuff that's going on in me,
Right.
no doubt, but we don't experience that. And I don't want us to speculate about what's going on in us, because then that would get us into the realm of my theory about the way my body works. Well, my heart rate must have been going up, and my adrenal glands must have been doing that, and whatever. But if that's not experience, that's not what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And which is not to deny that those things are happening. It's just not part of what's in your experience.
Mm.
So I think about your question of, sorry, you asked something like, so you're asking me to kind of try to remember the beep and see if I can remember if there was a sensation.
Mhm.
I think we acknowledge that there is some amount of recollection going on here. People do have to refer back to the past a little bit, and we don't want you to go back there and reconstruct in a way that might dig up stuff that wasn't really there,
Mhm.
which is why we do this so often, so that next time, hopefully, if you can, and if you can't, that's fine too, but you might notice it the first time around. It might be in your notes, it might just be much more obvious, like yes or no, there was a physical sensation.
Mm.
But we don't want you to go back and look for one.
Okay.
Does
got
that?
it. Yeah. Got it.
And we don't particularly care about shoulders or deep breaths or whatever. Those are just kind of examples of,
Mhm.
if it's in your body, I guess those are ways people could experience it. If you've got something like that or unlike that or whatever, we'd want to know what it is.
Mhm.
And saying, I don't know or I don't remember,
Mm.
it's just as good an answer as any.
Okay. Well, in reference to that, in terms of saying March, there was some relief, and exactly how that relief presented to me physically, emotionally, I guess I didn't focus enough on what those physical or emotional feelings were at the time. I mean, I could draw in on the moment, but I don't want to do what you said either, and you know, dig up things that maybe weren't exactly part of the experience. But to some degree, I can say that in the relief was due to knowing that I'm taking care of my health,
Mm-hmm.
and that in some way is a feeling, possibly physical, but for sure I know it's more emotional.
And then, and the other so we're trying to refine in many different directions at the same time. So
Mhm.
we understand that the relief is about my health.
Yes.
But that does not necessarily mean that my health is in my experience at the moment of the beep. It could be that I've started some relief process that was a result of my health, and now the relief is still going on, but the health is no longer in my experience. I'm not trying to say that's the way it is.
Right.
What I'm trying to get us to recognize is that what's in the experience, we have to look at pretty carefully and not try to guess or infer or theorize or whatever about things. Our task here is to get at experience.
Yes.
So I think we should go on to beat number 2.
Okay.
And I would say you're doing a great job.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the fact that you didn't narrow yourself down to the moment of the beep, I'm not at all critical of that. Nobody does. That's why we have to do this kind of thing. You know, it's the same reason why a good golfer can't hit a 300-yard drive the first time out. You know, he's got to practice at it, and
Perfect.
we're doing it.
The struggle is good as far as we're concerned.
Okay.
Okay.
Good to know.
Beep number 2.
Okay, so I was reading out loud when the beep 2 happened, and I landed on the word that.
And what, if anything, is in your experience at this moment?
I was creating a APA template for myself. For when I write papers, I have the template. And I was reading the instructions, and I landed on the word that. And right just before the beep, the word that was where I landed.
Mhm.
And in the word that, I would say my general feeling was focused on what I was doing.
So you are reading aloud.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so I understand that reading is in fact ongoing, like
Mhm.
you're making noise and whatever. Is that in your experience?
Yes, as in I'm reading out loud and I am bringing it back into myself and experiencing myself reading out loud.
And how exactly do you experience yourself reading?
I kind of just imagine that I'm teaching it and I'm saying it out loud. I don't know if this is useful, but I will read it like in an accent, or I'll just say it very confidently, and then that's like how it records itself, and I hear myself and I'll digest it that way when I'm trying to learn something or read something. So I am experiencing myself reading it.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And at this particular moment, are you more into the saying of it, or more into hearing yourself, or both, or
Both.
something else?
Yeah, it's both. It's like a little acting, but also learning at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm putting on this, I guess the accent into me is, or the confident sound, and like I talk as if I'm teaching it, makes it come off to me like I already know it. And in already knowing it, I feel that I can better learn it as I'm reading it.
Okay. And at this particular moment, are you reading in a teachery, confident voice?
Yes.
And that is, I'm understanding, part of your direct experience.
Yes.
So it's not just a fact of the world that if I walked by, I'd hear Lena's pretty confident, teachery sounding voice. You're somehow into the...
Ask that again? If you walked by?
Well, I'm not particularly interested in whether,
Okay.
like, somebody walks by. What I want to understand is if you experience yourself in the making of it teachery, confident sounding.
Mm-hmm.
Or does it just kind of happen to be coming out in that voice? And after the fact, you can say, okay, I experienced the speaking in that way, in that particular way.
Yes, and also at the same time as I'm experiencing myself do it, I'm experiencing myself learning from myself in that same way. So I guess I am teaching myself and learning from myself by taking on and reading out loud in that teachery vibe.
So I am accepting that that might be a great way to learn, like, and I'm fine with this theory, but I want to know if that all is in, like, I can see how that might allow you to learn better, and I want to know if the learning part is directly present to you, like I am learning or experience myself as learning.
Yes, I do.
And that is somehow at this moment I somehow...
Yes, I'm focused, and in that focus is this direct experience of me learning to myself while reading out loud.
And so I get the reading out loud portion, and what is the learning? How does that present itself to you?
So can I ask a sort of a more basic question than that, though? So do you experience yourself as having sort of two centers of awareness here? One is as the speaker and one is as the learner? Or does this seem like, well, I'm engaged in an exercise that I understand myself to do. I talk and learn here in a teachery kind of way. And when I do that, I expect myself to be learning.
I experience myself, I guess, in those two different ways. But
Simultaneously?
Simultaneously, yeah.
Equally, or one more
I
than
would
the
say
other?
equally, yeah. Because I can't, as I'm reading it out loud, I am taking it back in at the same time and digesting it. And that's how it's like two parts, but they're happening together, if that makes sense.
So the distinction that I want to be making is whether I experience myself as two focuses, two foci, I guess, or whether that's a sort of a theoretical or metaphorical or way of describing what the process is, that I've got sort of two ways of doing it, in which case there would be sort of one experiential focus that metaphorically could be split into two, or does it seem like I'm sort of two Lenas at the time? I'm the Lena who's doing the talking and the Lena who's doing the listening.
I feel the two Lena part. I feel that I'm doing the talking and doing the learning, and those are two separate happenings, but they're simultaneous.
Okay.
Okay. And that all sounded a little meta to me, like I'm noticing myself being the teacher and noticing myself being the learner. Is that right, or it's just I am the teacher, I am the learner?
Yeah, I would say that there is like a third, not a third Lena, I wouldn't say, but there is an awareness of the fact that I am doing this.
So I'm not only doing it, I notice myself to be doing it.
Like I know that I am choosing to read out loud like a teacher would to a class, teaching this material, and I'm also learning from this at the same time, and I'm aware that I am doing these two things together at the same time.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And you said that wasn't like a third Lena, but
Yeah.
was it, or so does it seem like there's three Lenas?
I wouldn't say that it's like a third Lena, but it is some observer in me, that is not analyzing, I shouldn't say that, but is aware of whatever it is I'm choosing to do, or whatever it is I'm choosing to be aware of. And when I utilize that observer for whatever particular moments you need it for, then it's obvious that, especially in that moment when I am reading and learning, and doing that process that I do, I realize, oh wow, I'm doing these two things, and I'm aware of these two things that I'm doing simultaneously. So there is a level of awareness that is watching this two thing happen here. If that makes sense, yeah.
So I'm both being the teacher, you reading aloud thing, and I'm learning from that, and I notice myself to be doing.
And I notice I'm
doing both of these.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And the learning part, is that like I hear myself and I'm comprehending what I'm reading, or is that something beyond that, or something different?
There's definitely a level of like a comprehension that takes place, and when I learn and I comprehend, that's like a more visual, I guess, experience, depending on what I'm learning.
So we're not interested in your process in general. We're interested in
At this
whether this is similar to or different from what you usually do is sort of irrelevant to us. We're interested in this particular moment.
Ask me the question one more time. So
I want to understand how the learning is present to you. What do you experience about the learning aspect?
Okay, I experience like a deep comprehension. I experience focus, like a deep focus. I am not aware of my outside world. I am completely just only focused on what I'm doing.
And that focus is somehow part of my experience. It's not just that I am in fact focused. I'm really visually focused, or I don't know. I want to understand what you mean by focus.
Focus in that I have the focus is centered on what it is I'm trying to comprehend, and I become hyper focused on it in a sense that the experience becomes like the outside world. I'm not experiencing the outside world anymore. I'm just experiencing this learning world that I'm now in.
So this seems to me, it sounds like it's much deeper than I'm just hearing the words. Like I am engaged with this reading.
Engaged, that's a good word. I would say engaged.
Focused on it. You're saying like deep comprehension?
Yeah.
And by deep comprehension?
Like, maybe you can even say meditate. Like it's like a meditation, but I mean, I'm not sitting like this, but I'm like out loud. It's, speaking out loud to myself. And it's, I guess in a way I'm meditating in that moment. That's the level of focus that I go into when I need to learn something.
So let me recap what I understand that we're talking about here.
All right.
At the moment of this beat, I am saying aloud, I'm reading aloud the instructions, and I'm at the word that, but I'm not just saying the word that, I'm reading the instructions, and the word that is where I'm at.
Yes.
And I'm reading that aloud in what we're calling a teachery voice, or I understand this and now I'm explaining it to you kind of voice. But I don't imagine a teacher or see a teacher or whatever. I'm just adopting a teachery flavor of my
Material.
speaking.
Yeah.
And at the same time, and in a seemingly separate consciousness of some sort, I am experiencing myself as mastering or engaged with this material. And that's not that I'm hearing the teacher voice, which it may be in part, and it's not that I'm all that, this part of me is also reading the material, which I may in part be doing, but somehow I experience myself as engaged with the material.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a third part of me, which is recognizing that there's these other two parts of me that are going on at the
Working
same
together,
time. And these are, and this is the part that I want to make sure that I'm understanding. That what we're trying to describe here is 3 experiential focuses, and not just one metaphorical way of describing things. Like, it could be that we say, well, I'm trying to learn this stuff, and there's part of me that wants to say that I teach it, and another part of me, but I'm not really experiencing that. What I understand us to be saying is that I do experience 2 or 3 separate, simultaneous, related, but distinct experiential centers.
Yes, I would say yes.
That
Very
be good?
cool. Yeah, I'm good too.
Okay. So
Number
we're on
3.
Beep 4?
3.
Number 3.
Oh, 3.
We could count that, I guess. It's
I already
2,
said
3, and 4.
Okay,
Right.
beep 3. Where was I at? So kind of the same as beep 2. I was reading, except I wasn't reading out loud. I was reading to myself, and I landed on the word "and" just seconds before the beep.
And is that part of a sentence?
Yeah.
And what's the sentence?
Well, what I wrote is results and discussion. That's what I wrote down.
So let's have a meta conversation about moments here, I guess, because I think maybe we have oversold the narrowness of the moment. So we are not interested in a very short period of time. It may have sounded like we're really interested in a very short period of time, but that's not really true. And I'm not saying that you misunderstood us. We probably conveyed it wrong, but this is part of what we have to figure out. What we're interested in is the precision of the time. So when we say we're interested, we want to make sure that we're talking about this time and not this time and not this time or whatever. We want to make sure we're talking about this. But we don't mean a really short instant. The time could be relatively long. So if your experiences of saying results and discussion as a sort of a unit of my experience, then that's what we want to know about. And we're happy to say, and the beep came at the end of results and discussion. So our distinction here, and it's been in the previous ones as well, is we don't want to imply that your experiences of the word results, and then separately of the word and then another experience of the word discussion.
Okay.
If that's the way your experience is, and some people are like that, they experience it one sort of unit at a time, one word at a time,
Yeah.
and we would be happy with that. But if your experience is of results and discussion, and the beep happens out and, then we would say your experiences of saying to myself results and discussion.
I definitely experience results and discussion as one thing.
Okay.
I don't break
And the
it
beep
up
just
like that.
happens
It
to
just
be at the
happened
word
to go
and.
on and.
I gotcha.
And I think maybe last session I did interpret that that you desired a more specific focus on the seconds before the beep.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like how I handled this next session or this next round. of
And
beeps.
and that's great.
Yeah.
So here again, I want to make 100% sure I'm not being critical.
Yeah.
This is what happens.
Okay.
You were here. We want to be temporally specific, and almost everybody interprets that as being short moments.
Okay.
We're not into short moments. We're into your experiential units.
Okay.
And sometimes experiential units are actually quite long for some people, like minutes long or something like that. I was doing the same thing for a minute and the beep happened in there. That's sort of unusual. Most experiential moments are a half a second or a second or something like that. But we don't prefer, we are not looking for really thin slices of experience. What we're looking for is experience that happens at very discrete times. Is that fair?
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
So, at the moment of the beep, I'm saying to myself results and discussion,
Yes.
and the beep happens at the end.
Mm-hmm. The beep happens at discussion and came right before the beep.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I don't know that you've said yet that you're saying it to yourself. I just know that you're reading it.
Yes,
Is that right?
I'm reading, comprehending, but internally this time, not out loud. And it's a quiz that I'm taking. So it's like a short online quiz that I was taking. And I was reading it silently to myself.
And Alec is right. So far, you haven't said it. You're saying it to yourself. Reading it to yourself and saying it to yourself are two very different things. And so, what is the experience of reading to yourself?
What is the difference between reading and saying it? I mean, I interpret it as I'm reading it, I'm saying it to myself.
And some people do, and I'm not trying to,
Yep.
to discourage that interpretation. But some people read without speaking it to themselves, and just get the meaning. And some people create pictures of results and discussions and don't say the word.
I can't just look at a word and then see the meaning and go on. Like, I look at the word and I have a whole visual experience.
So at the moment of this beep,
Yeah.
do you have a visual experience?
Yeah, because it's asking me to, the question in this quiz was to find a specific thing in the question. I didn't really write the full question down, but as I'm trying to find and search for the answer, I am going through my visual Rolodex of what I remember from when I was studying and how I process that. So I see it as a visual, almost like a snapshot picture of what I was looking at that when I was studying, that I refer to in the moment that I need to recall it. So in reading this question out loud, I am thinking visually in terms of trying to find the answer to what it is that I'm trying to answer.
Okay.
Yes.
So I'm reading this question, and at one time I heard you say you're reading it out loud, and another time I heard you reading it without saying it out loud.
In my head, out loud. Sorry.
Okay.
It's all in my head. This is all happening inside.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so are there two aspects of your experience going on at one time here? One is that I'm reading the question out loud, and the other is I'm seeing the...
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like this, as I'm reading the question, there is another aspect of my mind, or whatever you want to call it, that is flipping through whatever records and files in there that I need to pull out to relay that to what it is I'm trying to answer.
Okay.
Yes.
And here again, I want to make sure that I understand what you mean.
Okay.
So do you mean metaphorically, I'm going through a Rolodex and looking for something, or do you mean I actually see this and then this and then this and then this?
So I don't really see a Rolodex, and it's more like images that I've saved in when I was looking at, like, originally studying it. It's like a snapshot picture of what I was reading that somehow I store in my mind, and I recall it based on what I remember visually looking at before, and then I visually somehow take a snapshot picture of that and then recall that in my mind.
Okay. And so at the moment of the beep, is there a visual experience?
It's hard to say for certain right at the moment of the beep itself, but I can say that in the general question, as I'm reading the question and I proceed to answer the question, there is that. So at the moment of the beep, I couldn't say exactly if I was having a visual experience, but I know in reading the whole sentence, if I look at the whole sentence, I, yes, for sure, was having a visual experience of going back in my mind and trying to recall whatever it was that I snapshot in my studying so that I could relate it to the quiz I was taking.
Okay.
Makes sense.
so this is what makes this work interesting,
Okay.
and that is that I'm trying to understand what you're describing here, and there's still some ambiguities from my point of view.
Okay.
And I'm trying to iron those things out, to make sure. So I could understand what you're saying as being, well, I had a clear image, and it might have been here, and it might have been here, and I'm not too sure. Or I could have had a series of images, and there was a clear image, and another clear image, and another clear image, and one of those things was really right here, but I just can't remember which one, because I didn't realize you guys were going to be asking about that. Or it could be that I'm trying to see an image, but not really getting there, or maybe the visual thing is sort of metaphorical entirely, and I experience myself as in the manner of looking, but not really seeing anything. I don't want to prefer any one of those. I want to, and I'm not even 100% sure that you know what you mean by this, because I think people have theories about it, and then their theories cloud what their actual experience was, and so this is not a criticism of Lena either. This is the way people are, and we are trying to clear these things up so that Lena can say what's actually on in her experience, and we can understand what she's saying when she says it. And it's work. It takes effort and attention and skill and.
Yes, I would
and
say.
Time.
Yes, I would say it's hard for me to exactly describe the process in my mind in terms of this particular beep. I could say the general is...
And that's great,
Yeah.
as far as we're concerned.
Yeah.
We would far prefer you to say, well, I can't do it very well, than to pretend like you can do it, because then we would never know where we are. And I would like to say, maybe we're going to get better at it, and maybe we're not. It's possible that your experience is of the kind that is not describable or apprehendable or whatever, in which case we'll work at it, and when we're done working at it, or some number of days of working at it, we're going to say, well, that was fun, but we never did make progress. Or it could be that we'll get better at it. That either way is okay with us. That's I would guess, the honesty of this procedure, that we're not presuming that we can do it. We're trying to do it. We have structured a situation which we have found in the past helps us to do it with some people. Doesn't mean that it'll work for the three of us.
Got it.
And I think that we're getting a glimpse of why we have to do this more than one time. We have to learn what experience is, and what the moment of the beep is, and what the difference between metaphor and apprehension is, and all that stuff takes.
Yeah, I think I need to better understand what exactly you mean when you say breaking apart your experience and apprehending the experience and leaving out the metaphor and leaving out the this and that, because I don't know that my experience in myself knows to do that. Maybe I am metaphorical in everything I do, and maybe that that is part of me, and that's part of my experience.
And we would like to honor that if that's the case. So the art of this exchange is for me to tell you what I understand. And I am not trying to get you to tell me what I want to hear.
Yes.
I want you to stand your ground if that's what's necessary and say, Russ, you're asking the wrong question. You make it seem like you can separate metaphor from apprehension, and that's not possible for me. That if that's the way it is, you're going to have to teach me how to ask the questions, or how to give up. Right.
If there is a way that you can show me, like a technique that I could say, oh, this is how I apply metaphors to my everyday life or my everyday experiences, and I could say, oh, that's the metaphor I'm adding on to the experience. If I can just figure out how to separate it, maybe then I could do this better. But it's maybe I maybe I'm just a very metaphorical person.
And that may very well be true, and
Yeah.
in which case, we're gonna learn something interesting about a metaphorical person.
Mhm.
Okay.
And
And I would say I mean, that's what we're doing. That is the struggle, right? I mean, you
Yeah.
said a Rolodex, right? Which maybe you meant an actual Rolodex, and maybe you meant metaphorically it's like a searching process. And I
Yeah.
think we've raised our sensitivity of that, and what does that mean for Lena? And
Mhm.
maybe next time we have a better idea. Maybe next time it's like, oh shit, it was a real Rolodex, or nope, I just mean I'm searching, or whatever.
Yeah.
But
Yes.
we're developing some language for that.
Yeah, yes, and I too will be more mindful when I say a word and try to let you know that I'm not always literally saying
Mhm.
Rolodex, or I'll try to be more literal in what I'm experiencing, if that makes sense.
and that's good. And I would also say, I think you don't particularly have to explicitly try. I
Yeah.
think it will sort of, either it will naturally occur because we're talking to each other and trying to
Right.
understand each other,
Mhm.
and that skill will sort of generally
Right.
occur.
Okay.
And it's sort of like, in the golfer analogy, I suppose. I don't know much about golf either, but
Mhm.
what the teacher could say, well, you gotta keep your arm straight, and
Mhm.
you, for a while, will keep your arm straight, but as while you're trying to keep your arm straight, you're not gonna be a very good golfer. But sooner or later, you'll learn to keep your arm straight, and then,
Then you-
and so I'm not trying to tell you, don't try, because I don't think that's possible. I'm trying to say, I think it will naturally occur,
Mhm.
that we will get better at this
Mhm.
in some way. And the this of that statement, I don't actually know what that is.
Mhm.
It might be finding out about your experience. It might be finding out why this method doesn't particularly work well for Lena.
Mhm.
It might be how Alec knows more about it than I do, or whatever.
Mhm.
All of that stuff is fair game, I think, when in our trying to understand what we're saying, without just sweeping under the rug that we don't understand what we're talking about.
Mhm. Okay, I would say yes to that.
So I'm thinking we should go on to number 4, should we think? Or what time is it? Maybe
We've been going for about 50 minutes.
5:00 minutes?
5-0.
Well, maybe we should think that this is enough then.
Can I ask about the reading before we leave this
Yeah.
one?
Sure.
I don't know that we ever established. Is there a voice involved in that?
Mm-hmm.
Like an inner-
internal reading? Yes, yeah,
So I am innerly saying to myself the
Mhm.
words as I read them.
yes.
Results in discussion.
Oh, right, results in this.
Yeah.
And in your voice?
In my voice, yeah.
And like you sound.
Just like how I
Today?
sound to you right now, I'm hearing that inside.
And some people make a distinction between speaking and hearing. Like they might say, I'm saying those words, I'm the producer of them.
Mhm.
Or some people might say, I'm hearing them, they're in my voice, but my experience is of hearing. Some people say both. You might say, well, gee, I don't know, I'll pay attention next time.
Can you ask me that one more time?
So the question I'm asking is your experience of speaking results in discussion? Or of hearing yourself say?
Oh, both.
Both.
I'm experiencing both, yeah. I'm experiencing myself saying it into myself, and then experiencing myself listening to it. And if that,
Mhm.
I'm doing both at the same time. It kind of feels
And
like...
simultaneously?
Yeah. It's like a lot of the processes, it doesn't feel like it's one or the other in me. And I think that's kind of like where I get confused with questions, because it feels like it has to be one or the other. Not that you're
Mhm.
making me feel like it has to be, but I'm like, do I decide this or do I
Mhm.
decide
Mhm.
that? But I feel like a lot of my inner things or experiences, I feel, are happening simultaneously together,
Mhm.
or on top of each other, or somehow layered together,
Mhm.
but never consecutively one after the other. It's always very together
Hmm.
in how I do things. I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay.
So about this beep,
Yeah.
you were saying it's like I'm both speaking and hearing.
Yes.
And is that one simultaneous speaking and hearing, one, in the previous beep, it seemed like there were sort of two separate Lenas, one who was doing the speaking.
Yes.
And one who was doing the comprehending.
Yeah,
Does
the
this
one
seem
when I
like-
was reading out loud, there was, when I was reading out loud, I read in the teachery voice,
Mhm.
and I am able to take in what I'm reading and comprehend it through another version of myself.
Mhm.
So I'm learning Lena, talking out loud Lena,
Mhm.
and then there's this part of me that's overseeing that process
Right.
as well,
Yeah.
and kind of bringing it in. But the talking, teaching, reading out loud Lena and the comprehending Lena, that's both happening together. So like
Mhm.
each word I'm reading out loud, I'm at the very same time inside internally, I'm comprehending it at the same time.
Okay. And what about for beep number 3? Is the speaking and the hearing separated in the way the teachery and learny Lena are, or is it there's somehow more like one
Well, I wasn't,
thing?
because I was taking a test, so I didn't feel like I was trying to read the sentence. So of course there's some level of comprehension. So I'm reading the sentence, and as I'm reading it and hearing myself reading it inside, I'm comprehending what I'm reading.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel that that is a one process thing. Even
That
though
seems like one process
Right.
with both speaky and heary.
Yeah, like even though
aspects.
there's 2 parts in there, sort of, like if you really break it apart,
Yeah.
there's 2 parts. I feel it as a one thing process.
Yeah.
Like I'm not seeing it as separate from each other, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
And same with like the reading out loud in my teachery voice, and then and hearing it and digesting it, learning, comprehending. Even though I understand there's these 2 elements of me happening, and I'm also overseeing that, I understand there's this whole process happening.
Mhm.
It's all happening like on top of each other, if that makes sense. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like it's not
And
separate. Okay.
so let me say one more thing about this
Sure.
group, and then I think we should say this is good for today.
Okay.
And that is the distinction between speaking and hearing your own voice.
Mhm.
It's sometimes useful to think about a tape recorder. I can speak into a tape recorder,
Mhm.
and I can hear my voice come back out of a tape recorder. That separates those things out dramatically. But
Mhm.
it's the same voice and the same words and the same inflection and whatever, both going into the tape recorder and coming back out.
Mhm.
There are some people who say, when they have an inner voice, it's like I'm doing the talking into the tape recorder.
Mhm.
And there are other people who say, it's like I'm hearing my voice coming back out of a tape recorder. And then there are other people who say, that analogy doesn't make any sense to me. It's like I'm speaking and hearing at the same time. I can't really tear those things apart.
Or I can say, to me, I feel like I'm speaking in it, and I'm also getting it back.
Mhm.
I feel that's my experience of my inner self.
So I think we're
Yeah.
good. Do you have
Okay.
questions about what we've done here today?
I think I have a better understanding,
Okay.
so that's
the way it
good.
goes.
And I guess I would like to reiterate, you're doing a great
Yes,
job.
you really
That
are.
this is,
Okay.
that this is perfect as far as we're concerned.
Mhm.
And by perfect, what we mean is it seems like you're taking it seriously and
Yeah,
you're not,
I'm enjoying it.
you're not trying to shine us on and, get some academic credit or whatever. And
No, no,
and tell us
legitimately.
something that you think we want to hear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It seems to me that we're engaged in trying to understand something that might be interesting.
Yeah.
And that's pretty good as far as I'm concerned.
Well, I learned today that I'm very metaphorical, so I'm taking that away
Might be.
today.
All right, so
yeah,
let's
this is perfect.
stop these.